show you the different ways of creating tactile diagrams. I'm going to look at 3 different ways. The first way is using something called embossing film, or also known as German film. It was known as German film many years ago. The name seemed to fall out of fashion a bit, but I've heard a few people use it again recently. So known, as I say, German film or embossing film, and it's available from R&IB shop to buy. Now it's this very, very flimsy paper. It feels quite rough to the touch, and when you buy it, you must buy the geometry mat as well. Don't advise you to do this on your best wooden table. You're going to ruin it completely. I don't have a geometry mat with me right now, so I'm just actually using a very thick magazine and a piece of white paper on top, just for better contrast. So here is our embossing film, and you can use it in a variety of different ways actually. So the first and the easiest way to use it is with a pen, and a pen that's actually run out of ink is best of all. Now I'm going to just do a very simple square shape here, and I'm going to try and do it like a person with actually very little or no sight would do it. So put my pen on the paper and just going to press down really, really hard, and then back along and then up to my finger. Now I think you can just about see that. I've drawn a sort of square shape there, and you can feel the line on this side, but you can actually feel it even better on the other side, so on the reverse here. So that is embossing. You do need to use a huge amount of pressure, so it's not good for very young children. They need to really work on the pressure before they can draw on it, but it's very good once they have developed pressure for telling them how to draw a person. You know that many early assessments are how well a child can draw a person. So it's good for them to know for that reason, but also it's good for them to know in terms of how the body's put together, and that's going to help with mobility as well. So that's embossing film. You can use it to draw very, very simple diagrams with your pen, but you can also use something like this. This, people think are instruments of torture. This is called a spur wheel. Now you can use your spur wheel and your tactile ruler, and you can draw lines. So you can use it on embossing film. I'm just going to show you here. So I've got my spur wheel, and I'm just going to run it right the way along, pressing really hard. Oops. And you can see I've got my line there created by my spur wheel. I'm going to turn my embossing film over. Hope you can see that. See if I can get it. Not too bad. You can see my line. You can see where I went off as well. And that has produced a line. So you could actually, with your tactile ruler, you could draw a line of a specific length, even if you don't have very good or indeed no vision as well. So you can use your spur wheel and your ruler on German film, embossing film. You can also use it on Braille paper as well. So here's my ruler. And again, just going to draw my spur wheel along. Take it off. Again, I'm going to turn my paper over, and you can see my line just there. It's not very clear, but actually it's very clear with your fingertips. You can definitely feel the line. So that's what these are for. Many people haven't seen them being used. don't throw them out if you've got them in your service. Now you know what they're used for, and you can always use them to create simple diagrams if you're particularly in a maths class or something like that. The embossing film, you can do lots of different things. You can shade it in as well, just with lines, so it's good for doing fractions and things like that. Also, I've done volcanoes and showing how the volcano is made up of different layers, as well as a very quick diagram in a class as well. So lots of different uses for embossing film. So that's the first, very, very simple, fairly crude, it would have to be said, but very good for doing it on the spot for tactile diagrams. Okay, moving on. Next section, we're looking at thermoform pictures, and we have examples here for both primary and secondary aged pupils. So I'm going to start with this book here called Choosy Charlie. I'm just going to move the rest of them out of the way for now. Now, Choosy Charlie was a book that was actually created by Clear Vision Project, you can see in 1998. So it is quite old, and some of the pictures, as you will also find out in here, are quite old as well. So thermoform pictures are created by putting a piece of plastic down on top of an item, and then the plastic is gently heated to mould itself around the item. So this book is for quite young children. However, as I'll explain when I'm looking at the pictures, it's not perhaps for as young a child as you might think, because the picture in itself, or the raised part, is actually quite very difficult to understand, because really you are only touching a piece of plastic. So you need to have really experience of the real object and what it's like before you can actually tell what it is when it's made from a thermoform picture. So as you can see, this first picture in the book is a tape, which we used even before the days of CD, so most children wouldn't be familiar with that anyway. So this is not particularly a good example of a book that you would use today with a young person or a very young child. The next one, however, is much better, and it's various buttons, and in the story Charlie's got to choose a big button. But of course, as I explained when I was showing you some of the items that I use for teaching concepts, I would have big buttons and little buttons sewn onto a piece of fabric, and that's how I would introduce the concept of a button and introduce the concept of big and little as well. On the next page there, Charlie's got to find the small comb for Granny. Now you'll notice that here on this page the combs are set out very well in a very logical manner, so yes, easy to find the small one, although maybe I would have justified it to the left hand side, so you could tell that it was small. Whereas if I just flip back the page to the buttons, they've been set out quite randomly, diagonally across the page, and that's not really a very good layout either. I would much prefer to have laid them out in a straight line as well. I remember using this book many years ago with a young child who had some additional difficulties as well. He really quite enjoyed this page because it's different kinds of biscuits that have been put under thermoform. So I'm sure you can tell what they are, bourbon and Jaffa cakes and chocolate fingers and what have you. But again, the child needed to have the experience of the real biscuit before he could ever identify what those were. And then finally, we've got some straws here, and Charlie's got to find the bendy one, so that's been put right at the bottom. Again, a better layout for this page as well. Oh, and finally we've got 2 notebooks, and he's got to find the one with the star on it. So that's nice as well, but again, you would need to know what a star was and have experience of a star, being able to hold it before you'd move on to these thermoform pictures, and a notebook here with a spiral ring binder. Again, you need to have experience of that. So although the book in itself may be for quite a young child, the diagrams and the pictures that have been created with the thermoform are actually quite advanced. You would need a lot of pre-learning to go along before you actually started the book. So the next book I'm going to show you, it's actually just a demonstration pack, and this is comes from the Living Paintings or Living Picture books, and here we've got our thermoform on the front. So it's not been a real teddy bear that they've put on, but they've obviously created one, a mould, and put the plastic down there. But again, there's very little definition really of the bear, so there would need to be a lot of explanation that would go into this. About this is a teddy bear, these are his legs, these are his arms, his paws up here, before you could actually go ahead and tell the story. So lots and lots of information there, and then you can see that inside they've got examples of the storybook, and got nice clear plastic over the top, so that the story is actually brailled. So nice to be able to read that with a child and an adult together, or even siblings, for example, that could read that. So again, lots of teaching needs to go in order to explain this picture of the bear. Now my final book for younger children is this one here. It's called Jennifer's Messes, and this book has actually been created by the American Printing House for the Blind in the United States. Kentucky is actually where it's based. So I want to really point that out right away, because people sometimes think that books that have been prepared by some place that's well known for visual impairment, it's bound to be a very good book. Well, let's see if it is actually. So there's a story, and there's Braille on it, and then we come to the pictures here. Here's our first picture. So the story goes that in the kitchen, Jennifer spilled her Cheerios, so breakfast cereal. If you don't see, actually what we've got here are little sort of almost lumps. This feels like a raised bit on the plastic. Now, if you've got vision, obviously you can see the yellow bit, so it looks a little bit more like a Cheerio, but really it's quite hard to define that is a loop shape with a hole in the middle. It's like a donut, tiny as it is. So that is quite tricky to understand, and there need to be a lot of explanation, touching real Cheerios as well, to know that that was a Cheerio. That would be really quite hard to tell. On the next page, it's talking about she went to watch the TV and she made a mess. There were pretzels in the bowl, and then she dropped them and they're on the floor. So again, that they've got this raised plastic, and it's meant to be a pretzel. Quite a difficult thing if you don't know what a pretzel is. I'm just going to move that over there. I didn't realise it was not so well in shot. If you don't know what a pretzel is, then that's a very difficult thing to work out just by feeling this shape. Again, if I was actually creating this book, depending on the age of the child, I might first of all have created it using real Cheerios and real pretzels, and then moved on to this. This is a much higher order skill to actually identify what it is. On the next page, let's put that up here. These are crayons. She broke 3 crayons. Again, very difficult to actually work out what this raised plastic is. So again, I would probably use real objects again. And when her friend came over, she broke her barrette, which is really a fancy name for a hair grip. So again, it's got a bow on the end, really quite hard to tell the definition there. I might have used a real one as well. So I'm not going to go through any more of this book, but you do get the idea of what I'm saying, that actually it's quite tricky to work out what these pictures are just by looking at them, the plastic with your fingers. You really need to have the real objects first to help you. And perhaps in this book, is thermoform the way I would go? Probably not, I have to say. I probably would make the book with real objects. But it's interesting nonetheless. But it also goes to show that this book was created by the American Printing House for the Blind. Don't think that just because they have their name on it, it's going to be perfect. Okay, so finally, now we move on to some diagrams that would be used in a secondary school, and particularly in science, biology here. We have a diagram made in thermoform of an egg and development of the chick in the egg. So we've got probably string that's been used for the outer rim of the egg, and then various textures and so on for the yolk. There are also Braille labels. If I hold it up, you can see these more easily. So the centre has been labelled in Braille for the yolk, and here it says the airspace at end here, which again has been denoted by a little bit of string to mark it off where it is, giving you the label for that as well. Over the page we have the development of the chick within the egg, and again more Braille labels have been added to this diagram too. And further on we have got another fairly simple picture here that's been created, and this one is for a very simple machine, so a physics diagram really. We've got arrows here and showing a balance. And then on this book here we have got a diagram of a fly, so you can see in quite intricate detail the different parts of the fly and the eyes, but again a lot of explanation would need to go into this as well. You couldn't just present it to the child. And in here on this page we've got a diagram of the leg of a common housefly, and the parts of the leg are labelled in with Braille as well. The final type of diagram that I would like to show you is that one created by Swell Paper and a heat photocopier, or a heat copier rather. So this is a special Swell Paper that we use. It feels quite soft to the touch on this side. It always comes in this sort of light cream colour. You would create your diagram on normal paper and then photocopy it onto the Swell Paper. You can of course create it directly onto the Swell Paper, but bear in mind that this is quite expensive paper, so if you make a mistake, it's a lot of money to throw out. From then, once you have copied your diagram onto this paper, it then gets passed through the heat copier, and anything that is black is raised up. So you can see that on this diagram here, it's a graph, and anything that is black is raised up, and so it feels quite almost soft, almost furry texture, if you like, quite distinctive. So you can get Braille fonts, so the axes on this graph have been numbered with the Braille font. You have to be careful what size you use, because you want it to be very similar to what you would get on a Perkins Brailler. Lines are extended out so that it's right beside the number, and the grid lines as well are also raised, and there's a slight difference in texture between the ones that are running horizontally and the ones that are running vertically as well. Crosses have been added to the points on the grid, and then I've actually used sticky back Braille paper to name each point, use it with a letter as well. So most of this booklet is just different graphs that have been done over time. Some are better than others. Always we label the top of our page because this book of graphs will relate to a page that was being done on a maths textbook as well. So that's one example of how Swell Paper is used to create a tactile diagram in maths, and they are used a lot for maths and science diagrams as well. They are relatively easy to make. You can get grids, and there are websites as well where you can get diagrams that have been already simplified, and it's just a case of copying them onto the paper. But you do have to be quite critical when you look at them to make sure that you're choosing ones that have been adapted appropriately.